I'm Alex Matrosov and Fabio Pagani, vulnerability research lead at Binarly. So about me, you probably can just find on Google. I will save time. But we have the tradition. Every LABScon, we presenting some new vulnerability. And we have a new news for you. And PKfail actually been already disclosed, right? But we have some spicy cherry on the top, especially for LABScon crowd today. Yay. And I have a bad news for you. It's 2024, and industry investing billions of dollars to secure the devices, silicon, software, but we still have the broken secure boot. Think about that. If you're not using Apple device today, probably your secure boot is broken. At least 8% devices in this room is broken. But actually, I'm not sure about Apple. OK, let's go. So kudos to Binarly research team. It's been a team effort. It's not just two of us. And we have pretty interesting agenda. But let's start from the beginning. So PKfail, it's not happens overnight. And its ties go to 2016. So when actually first time vulnerability researcher from Czech Republic discovered non-production keys being used on Lenovo devices. And later on, basically what happens, data breach, and American Megatrends code leaked with one of the Taiwanese OEMs being hacked. And then in 2022, one unknown company called ASUSTeK and her subsidiary Aeon, which is focused on industrial devices, by the way. And the developer been thinking it's a good idea to just upload the code to the GitHub with public repository with all the private keys. So, and this happens, and in 2022, it's basically been uploaded. And in 2024, the beginning of the year, we find out actually these keys pretty much broadly present in the industry. So here's the original tweet from this Czech Republic researcher and CV from Lenovo. And of course, history never repeats, right? So we're good. And basically, take a look on some retrospective view on the PKfail. We took a data set of public firmwares, about 80,000 different images, different vendors, Lenovo, Dell, HP, you name it. And basically, we tried to look how many of these images still impacted by this leaked, not like yesterday, years ago, on public-private key. And we've been surprised by many different facts. First, this key is not only reused by single vendor, the same key exposed by multiple vendors, by multiple product lines, by multi-year releases, and you can go on and on how many failures have been happening there.
Yeah, so as Alex mentioned, we found in total 22 unique untrusted keys inside our dataset of more than 80,000 firmware images. And this table summarizes the 5 top most common keys that we find. There are a few insights that we can take from this table. First is that all of these keys were generated by American Megatrends, AMI, as based on the subject and the issuer of the certificate. And also, as Alex mentioned, these keys persist into the UEFI ecosystem for a very, very long time. For instance, the second to last one is actually, we found it in devices that were released as back as 2014 and as recently as 2023. But what's most scary, honestly, is that these keys actually are shared among vendors, and not only that, they also go on a very diverse set of devices. For instance, we found the first key on gaming laptops, but also on enterprise servers. And now I'm sure that maybe somebody of you is actually wondering, how is it possible that Acer, Fujitsu, Lenovo, Gigabyte, they all share the same key? the same untrusted key, right? That's a bit strange. And, well, that's actually one of the perks of the UEFI supply chain structure, where at the top we have the IBV, in this case AMI, which actually generated and included one of these untrusted key inside their reference code. This reference code is then passed to OEMs and device manufacturer. And if none of these entities will remember to replace this key, then it will actually end up on devices from different vendors. Now there is something important to say here as well, is that so far we only talk about public keys. We're only talking about certificates, which are shared among vendors, super bad, which are clearly marked as do not trust, also bad, but that's not a security issue per se. To make it actually security relevant, we need to find the private part of one of these keys. And, well, long story short, the UEFI ecosystem has been affected by multiple leaks in the past decade, either by hacking or by accident. And guess what? In one of these leaks, we actually found the private part of the platform key. This key, no, it's coming. The bad part is coming now. Wait a second. So we found this key. We went to basically convert it so we can try to execute a POC. And turns out that this key is password protected. Yeah, nice, right? Except that the password was actually stored plain text in a file in the very same folder. And it was ABCD, right? So also super, super easy to crack. So double bad stuff happening over there. And I mean, now we're laughing, guys, but this key has actually been included in firmware released between 2018 up until now. And it's still out there in hundreds of devices from a lot of different vendors. I also want to give you a bit more context about this repo. The Ryzen repository was created on GitHub, as Alex said, in 2023 by an employee of an ODM which thought that it could be a good idea to publish it online. 3 months later, a random internet dude actually noticed this leak and decided to archive it on the Internet Archive, which is still, and it's still there, and you can still go and search it. I'm sure you will not have problems in, in finding it. Finally, in May, this repository was deleted by the owner, and we have to wait, though, until June for all the remaining forks to be removed on GitHub after AMI sent a DMCA notice to GitHub. And this is just to tell you that this repository has been basically out there for almost 6 months. It went unnoticed for a long time, and it took 6 months to be removed on GitHub.
Supply chain security, it's not a joke, right? And think about PKfail as an apartment building when all the doors have the same lock, and all the residents have the same key. And then one resident lost the key. It's impacting the entire building. But now think about, it's not a single building, it's many of them, like vendors producing the devices. Let's go on the disclosure. So basically, how that started? Internally, we started developing some additional verification on our product, and we figured out some of these certificates contain do not trust. And it sounds not good, right? So, and we started conducting more deeper research on that. And then, basically, we found what Fabio mentioned on the GitHub. And it's been very surprising to us. Of course, we are good guys. We work with CertCC because also we are a small startup. We can't go with like hundreds of these silicon and device vendors to actually disclose this vulnerability and communicate with them broadly in the industry. So CertCC issued vulnerability note at the end of August, and also CVE, because it's very hard to fix this vulnerability without actually assigning CVE. And it's also no joke here. We basically report to many vendors and say, do you have a CVE for that? No? Oh, OK, it's fine. We will not going to fix it. And it's really happening in 2024. This mindset is actually not the mindset which is matching secure by design practices, or actually the efforts industry right now taking to actually remediate supply chain security issues or make it more resilient ecosystem, right? And when we're talking about impact to the entire industry, we actually developed this validation and detection service for this vulnerability with open API, no authentication, etc., called PKfail, obviously. And we get about 11,000 uploads, unique images, and this percentage of actual vulnerable images pretty much matching our initial assessment from public data. And also, we actually find out the impact on device ecosystem. It's way bigger than we expected initially. We had some firmwares from the voting machines, because these devices also produced by same vendors, and they shipped to someone who actually put the software on top, and then it became a voting machine. POS terminals, ATMs, and obviously gaming consoles as well. And this is actually a very serious problem. And also IBVs. We mentioned it, American megatrends, but it's not only single IBV do that. So we found a lot of keys from inside as well, which is non-production keys and appears on the devices, and it's not only x86, it's actually ARM devices as well. On the other side, it's also Phoenix, but Phoenix actually, they have a less exposure to the market, and we just found a few keys, and looks like they're more focused to not repeat this failure. They have some before, which has been happens in 2016. All right, let's focus on the most interesting and spicy part, the demo and exploitation.
All right, so before moving on to the POC, I just want to give you a quick overview of how the UEFI boot process works. So you turn on your machine, and the UEFI firmware will actually get loaded in memory and executed. The platform is initialized, the peripherals too, and finally the control goes to the UEFI boot manager. The UEFI boot manager has a task of searching for the OS bootloader and load it and execute it so that the operating system can actually start. The first part of this boot chain is actually secured with hardware-based verification mechanism, such as Intel BootGuard. And this works quite well, as long as, of course, also these keys are not leaked. And that's something that also happened a couple of years back. Just go on our blog post if you want to read more about that. On the other hand, the second part of the boot process, meaning how the boot manager decides if the bootloader is trusted or not, is done by Secure Boot. And this is what we're going to talk about more today. Secure Boot uses 4 different databases for these verification purposes. The first two, the signature database and the forbidden signature database, which are DB and DBX in UEFI terminology, are what's actually used for the verification. What happens is that basically the UEFI boot manager checks if the OS bootloader is signed with a key that is present in DB but is not present in DBX, so that it was not revoked. Above these two databases, we have the CAC database that contains multiple keys, usually from OS vendors. And these keys are generally used to update the content of DB and DBX, because these two databases are not static. They change over time. For example, Black Lotus was discovered a few years ago, and Microsoft, in that case, had to issue an update for DBX that contains all the signatures of the bootloader used by Black Lotus, so this threat could not be exploited anymore. And finally, at the top of this hierarchy, we have PK, which is the master key, effectively, of Secure Boot, and which is the one that we actually have basically found problems with. That said, developing a POC for PKfail is actually pretty easy, because there is no exploitation or any crazy stuff like that. We only need to use tooling that Microsoft and Linux give us to interact with these databases. First step, that we use the leaked private key to append a new key to the CAC database. Second, we add to the DB the signature of a module which is under our control. Finally, we copy this module to the ESP. We set some options from the UEFI bootloader, and we finally reboot the device. I will show you in a second what the reboot looks like after the attack is done. But before that, I want to really stress one thing. PKfail is not an OS problem. It's actually an OS agnostic vulnerability because it affects UEFI firmware, which is what runs before the OS. And that's why we were able to develop quite quickly 2 POCs, one for Linux and one for Windows, and you can just go and check them out here on YouTube. Here I just want to show you a quick part of the attack after we basically reboot the device. That was too much. Let's see. Yep. Perfect, yeah. OK. Now we reboot the device, and in a second you will see that the UEFI bootloader will actually verify our own malicious module and execute it. And in this case, the module just prints a simple text string. But guys, this could be Black Lotus. This could be one of your UEFI bootkit that can infect the operating system and the user space application. And here you will see that this attack is also completely transparent to the OS. And for instance, Windows tell us that secure boot is still enabled. So it's difficult to say it from the operating system.
Great demo, Fabio. Of course, we can't leave you without new vulnerability. And cherry on the top of our talk, it's a new discovery on base management controllers. So basically, it's enterprise servers with Supermicro. And all us knew, like, Supermicro is most popular servers around the world. And of course, the cheapest one, and it's why they not investing much on security, and what can go wrong, right? So we found on base management controllers, and it's not like a big course and demo with the PKfail you've seen on Windows 11 with all updates. So it is basically non-production keys on very small microcontroller. That means it's happening repeatedly in the different areas of the industry. It's not like vendors reusing these non-production keys in some specific devices. No, not at all. They're actually reusing them broadly on all types of the devices, and it's scaring me. So we just dropped this blog. You can see the link on the bottom of the slide with all the technical details, but more important things here, why it is bad, why is this not only about non-production keys, and why chain of trust on base management controllers of American megatrends is actually broken. So we started researching. Basically, we report this non-production key issue to Supermicro, and they said, you know what, key is not leaked, all good, it's actually not exploitable, and we start researching deeper about their boot flow, and then we figured out their chain of trust on BMC has some inconsistencies. And the key actually, which is on U-boot, it's not routed back to the silicon with a fused key or basically hash of the key from the ROM. And what that's mean, if the key is leaked, you can malform U-boot or something else and actually attack the entire BMC flow during the boot, embedded Linux as well. And this is actually very bad because you can malform anything. And all of us knew, right? So base management controllers, it's key from the castle and data centers. All right, so let's talk a bit about the response. Supermicro actually said, oh, we use test keys hasn't been leaked. So yes, that's true, not leaked today. And it's never happened, right? Test key is NIST compliant, right? But they also start kind of like talking about additional verification, additional security checks. And during our research, very deep code analysis and all this stuff, we didn't find anything like that. And I think the major issue why the conversation happening in this direction, because one-time programmable fuse, it's one-time programmable fuse, and then all the servers they released by today need to be recalled. So we don't know, we can't confirm this 100%. It has been a case why they say that, but I think so. And test case basically few statements we strongly disagree because we have a confirmation it's not true. So, as a conclusion for our talk, cryptographic keys and cryptographic materials between multiple vendors is widely reused, and it's happening all the time. Cryptographic materials also not correctly stored, and it's caused a lot of data breaches and leaks. And why first two items is happening? First of all, the software supply chain for developing the firmware is quite complex, and usually like it's OEMs involved, which is producing most of the code, and they producing for multiple vendors. They based somewhere overseas, and this is where all the problems could start. So because companies try to reduce the cost, when it's go to the cost reduction, first thing which is reducted, it is security. And accidentally, the keys, of course, could be leaked, and later on, the entire industry could be impacted. And I hope after the PKfail, all these lessons will be learned, and the history will be not repeat again, right? So, thank you so much, everyone.